this idea that computers shouldn't just be for hobbyists, that it should be something for the mainstream, that it would end up being every man's tool and the most sort of powerful tool that we have out there. And so I think what he was so passionate about from the beginning was this idea of computers being intuitive things for us to use, as opposed to things that would scare us. In Scientific American, I think he read this story. And that obviously stayed with him, this idea that human beings are tool builders. And they might fall short in what has been given to us naturally, but their ability to build tools allows them to supersede what they could be capable of. He knew that he had met somebody special when he met Wozniak, and he knew that Wozniak, I think, was going to be a vehicle for him to sort of, get into this business. Because I think Steve Jobs was a great salesman, I think he was a great negotiator, and he was a great observer of talent. I just thought the script was genius. I just thought, that's, the best modern day script I've read, for sure. Yeah, I think Danny is without doubt the most positive and energetic director that I've ever worked with. He's just constantly upbeat on set and constantly positive and encouraging and, as I say, full of energy. And I think he injects that same positivity and energy in his sort of visual storytelling, in the sort of energy he puts into the camera. It was also the fact that, Jobs needed somebody to talk to the board. He needed somebody to handle the board. As far as the board were concerned, this was, they realized that he was kind of maverick genius in the tech world, and then some tech people would say, well, Jobs didn't really know that much about tech. So, it's an interesting contradiction. But they found him difficult to deal with, and they didn't see him as really a CEO material. This story is important because he's changed all of our lives. He's changed the way the world works, the way we communicate to one another, the way we interact with one another, how, like I say, we watch films now, how we listen to music, how we buy things. So somebody that has that sort of influence deserves to be reflected on. I think he's just great for any film set. Seth is an extraordinary person and professional. He's just so generous and relaxed and easygoing, but is one of the hardest working people in show business. He manages to do all of those things, and it seems like he's just chilling. But as we know, he's writing, he's producing, he's directing, he's acting. He's an incredible person and just very, very easy to work with. And I think, outside of the fact that he's such an accomplished sort of producer, director, writer, as a performer, he brings such humanity to characters. He's just smart. He's been doing it for a while, Jeff, and he knows storytelling. He runs a theater company in Michigan, and he knows the components of storytelling. So it's the little things that he does. Like in the first act when Jobs is sipping the wine, he's observing him drink the wine. It's like really interesting nuances again that he'll choose, or character observations, which are just little moments that really set things in motion. Kate is, I have to say, I owe her a lot for this, for my own performance, and just sort of how much generosity she brought to the set and how much support she brought to me. She's a real team player and she's a real leader. That's the first thing. She's a natural born leader, Kate, and she made sure that everybody was in the right frame of mind. And you know, if you know, how's Danny doing, and how's Seth doing, how am I doing, just making sure that there's harmony in the right places. And then, you know, that's just, she hasn't even started acting yet. I remember when I arrived at the read-through, before we started rehearsals, she just had Joanna Hoffman's accent off. I mean, I'd been watching clips of Joanna Hoffman and I was just like, oh my God.
When you hear that a film is being made that is 180 pages long with very few actors in it, written in 3 acts by Aaron Sorkin, being directed by Danny Boyle with Michael Fassbender playing the lead, you do everything you can to get yourself cast in that movie. I was very excited by, quite honestly, I think the whole package of what it was. I knew the writing was going to be incredible. I knew that it would be thrilling to work with Danny, who I'd never worked with before. The idea of standing in the same room with Michael Fassbender was enough to make me want to faint, let alone work with him. And also I was intrigued by the notion that this wasn't a biopic, and it really isn't. It doesn't focus on his illness. It really only features one member of his family, his daughter Lisa, and it covers 3 specific periods in his life, covering the launch of 3 different products during his working life. I knew it would be very unusual, and to play a woman who I'd never heard of, and actually most people will never have heard of Joanna until this film comes out, but she really was like his work wife, and very influential in terms of how he functioned as a person, how he dealt with the people around him day to day. She really made him toe the line and helped him in a way to be the best version of himself that he could be in terms of personal relations. So the film is written in 3 acts, really like a play, and each act is pretty much 45 minutes thereabouts of continuous real-time backstage prior to the moment of the launch of a new product. So it's a very heightened pressure cooker type atmosphere that is created by the intensity of the writing and the pace at which the story is being told. And it's just very cleverly done, because as an audience member, you feel a part of it. You feel present. You feel that you're backstage with those people. You feel as excited and nervous as they are to walk on that stage and launch this product. He just took it all on. He just handled it all. He was the right balance of utterly terrified and completely determined at the same time. You know, no actor is free of nerves ever. I would hope not. And I really do mean this. I have never seen an actor conduct themselves in a more professional way than Michael did. And no fuss, you know, he just knuckled down. He had his own strange system of how he went about things. He didn't particularly want help after hours with running lines. I would often say to him, listen, I'm happy to meet up. We could just run a bunch of dialogue. And no, it's okay. He would just do it his own way. And I'll never forget a profound moment, actually. We all came into the rehearsal room having filmed Acts 1 and 2 to start rehearsals for Act 3. And we had a cold table read. Everyone sat around the table, and every single actor, myself included, had our scripts in front of us. Michael didn't even get his out of his bag. And it was only because he knew all his lines, and he wanted to prove to himself that he'd nailed it. And that's a real actor. You know, he was not only setting the bar incredibly high for all of us, but he was doing as much as he could to cement his own confidence in playing that role and making the choices that he wanted to make. So Joanna's constant managing of Steve really did come from a place of genuinely wanting him to just stop, calm down, take a breath, and be real, which often wasn't his strong point. And she really did manage him, and he really couldn't cope without her so often. The one thing I will say that set Joanna and Steve's relationship apart from all his other working relationships was that she didn't need anything from him. And I would say that the majority of the people working with him, they needed something from Steve, whether it was that paycheck or whether it was to work their way higher up the ladder, to learn from him, to gain from his success, to ride on his coattails, whatever it was. Joanna genuinely didn't need any of those things. And it's quite remarkable how I think that changes the central dynamic of their relationship, because she could just be utterly honest with him. She never felt threatened by him. She never felt that her job was in jeopardy. She just wanted for him to be the best version of himself as a person, as a man, and as a father that he could possibly be. And that, I think, is what makes their relationship feel very warm and quite profound, actually. I really hope it will surprise people. I mean, Seth is brilliant anyway. As we know, Seth is a genius. Seth is hilarious. Seth is, the reason that my children are begging me to let them watch Pineapple Express. Seth is untouchable. There is no one like him. You really can't compare him to any other actor out there. Certainly no other actor of comedic brilliance that he has. But this is different. Seth isn't funny in this film. He's extremely sincere, really very touching, and fascinating to see him play something so different. But we're all used to a certain degree of improvising or changing things up or just mixing a few words around to just make them feel a little bit more comfortable or natural to say. But, Aaron Sorkin writes it in a way that is natural, does sound as though you're improvising, and as though these characters are coming up with these thoughts in that moment. And that's what makes Aaron Sorkin Aaron Sorkin. Somehow, yes, it's about Steve Jobs, but it's also rather brilliantly about how we all now live our lives because of that brilliant man. And one can't help but feel tremendous admiration for Steve, and also a certain degree of gratitude as well that he was as brilliant as he was, because he has enforced how we communicate today. And if used correctly, there's something just brilliant about that.
I played John Sculley, who Steve brought in to kind of run the business side of what he was doing, and he made John a very attractive offer. John had been hooked up with Pepsi and was part of that campaign that sold Pepsi so well, the Pepsi generation and that whole thing. And so Steve really liked John's marketing genius and brought John in to kind of, you run that side of it, I'll be the visionary. And when it was that, it was terrific. It was like a bromance. They really enjoyed each other. And I think for John, the excitement of as Steve had put it, you can put a dent in the universe, you can change the world with me, and you want to come along for the ride. And it was a great ride until it wasn't. There's a musicality to Aaron's writing, to all the great writers over the decades, centuries. You go back to Shakespeare, there's a musicality. The good ones, there's a music to it. And once you find the music, the rhythm that Aaron has written in there, it just sings. His scripts just sing. I remember when we did the reading of the script way back during rehearsals before we started shooting, and you heard Michael and Kate and everyone, just Seth, everyone just jumping in, and suddenly it was like this orchestra that they were all playing in the same key, but they were all talking at once, and this would come and that would happen, and there were no ad libs, and it reminded me of the things that Aaron's written. It certainly reminded me of Newsroom, and it was great to hear. There's a music to what he writes. It was a very smart decision to set it the way Aaron did. It's pretty much in 3 different launches and at 3 different times, 3 different products. And there are things that happen that people say that did not happen at this particular location, but he's taken the dramatic license to take what Walter wrote and what Walter researched for the book and going, I'm not gonna, we'd be doing a Ken Burns 20-part series in order to do it that way. So he's confined it into these certain areas, settings, and then but brought everything to it. There was an emotional attachment for Sculley. He's not just a cold-hearted CEO. He's a guy that really liked changing the universe with Steve Jobs and did what he thought was right for business decisions, and that became a betrayal of Shakespearean proportions to Steve. That was just a sound business decision. From what I read, Steve was a great salesman, and he sold Sculley on this. And it was attractive, it was sexy. There was nothing, as he said to John, he said, you know, aren't you tired of selling sugar water? You get a chance to change the world. And you know, Sculley, yeah, I could. You're young again. You're with this younger visionary, he's obviously a genius. He needs to be corralled, but he's a genius. He's a visionary. He's seeing things 20 years down the road. That's one thing Sculley said later. He goes, a genius is someone who sees 20 years down the road right now and knows how to get there. Michael's really making sure that he tells the truth with Steve Jobs, that he really tries to get to the core of why Steve did this and why he did that. It's certainly not an impression, and nor is it intended to be, but the truth is there.
What I didn't realize that Steve Wozniak was as instrumental in making Apple as he was until I started doing this movie. You know, I'd never even heard of Steve Wozniak until he was on that Kathy Griffin reality show. That was literally the first time I was like, oh, there's another guy? I thought it was Steve Jobs. I play Steve Wozniak, who's the co-founder of Apple Computers with Steve Jobs. He would probably describe himself as as an engineer, basically. He was kind of the guy who conceptualized the idea that computers were something that everyone could have in their home, because he just wanted one so badly that he invented a way that he could obtain one, basically. And in doing that, kind of accidentally made a way that everyone else could have one also. He is kind of seeing that Steve Jobs, you know, I think for him it kind of is beginning to signify the end of his reign, as, you know, the Apple II was the most successful thing ever built, essentially, and Wozniak invented it. It was his machine, and Steve Jobs is about to come out with a new machine that could potentially begin to render Woz's machine obsolete, and what he wants is some recognition for the team that created the Apple II, because maybe they're not going to be around for much longer. His greatest skills seem to be projecting what the next phase of what humans might want is, you know? Whereas Woz literally is obsolete today. Like, what he did isn't a thing people do anymore, literally. And I think that's why his inclination is probably to look back and acknowledge the shoulders of the people that you stood on in order to get where you are, because he isn't someone whose skill set applies to the future, whereas Jobs' skill set only applied to the future. The structure is so cinematic and that it almost, and so different from a normal, biographical movie, that it almost eliminates it from even having to be real life in my head. It's like, clearly this didn't happen. I mean, it's obviously the 40 minutes before every speech he had this an arc that with all these same-sex people. I mean, maybe they were all there, maybe he had interactions with them, but I don't for a second think that this actually happened, and I don't think anyone does. I think it's a brilliant way of portraying 30 years of history by over the course of 3 kind of moments.
I read the script, and it is a starburst of a script. I mean, it is like, takes your breath away. I mean, obviously, there's so many things you could think about at that point, reasons not to do it, which are all to do with being careful. Should you really be doing, a film about a person like this, a controversial person like this, with many people with different opinions, and there'll be family and all those kind of stuff. We've been through some of that on 127 Hours that we've done, the problems of doing true stories, if you call them that. But actually, you read the script and it felt like you would be crazy not to do it. It was extraordinary. It was something, I'd never done anything like it before. The challenges that it gave you were staggering, and it took on the idea that Sorkin had begun with Social Network, which is to look at these people who create this modern world, and that we are talking about the forgers of the world we're living in. We're only just really beginning to live in it now, and the people who create this world for us, and what cost has that had for them, and what can we learn about them by our artists like Sorkin. There are 2 people who are ultimately almost more important than Jobs himself in the film, and they're Joanna Hoffman and Lisa Brennan-Jobs, who Sorkin talked to and only feature very briefly in the book itself. But I think for Aaron, they were clearly fundamental to him being able to write about Jobs. And we always used to think that this was in a way, his behaviour. Some people regard him as a monster, and if you do regard him like that, then this is a monster made beautiful by language and by these 2 women, really, who are the way that the subject is humanised, really, and prevents you being in a tech geek world or in a world of just rumour and gossip. It allows you to feel, really, and I think that's what's extraordinary about Sorkin's work, is that he takes these extraordinary figures who are almost beyond feeling in a way, their achievements, their ability, and he connects them with something we can all feel, really. He's taking these extraordinary figures, which is what Shakespeare used to do, and he's grounding them in stuff that we all suffer from, whether that's ambition and vanity, ego, whatever the flaws are. We all suffer for them at certain to certain levels and certain degrees, and so in a way, he's a kind of I hate me for saying it. Yeah, I think he is a bit of a modern Shakespeare the way he writes, and certainly there's that. You felt that in reading the script. I mean, the script was almost 200 pages long, and I hope the film is the same kind of experience for people. You read it like that. I mean, it's gone. It's like, whoa. You speculate and hope and think that they might be able to deal with the pressure of it, but you never really know. I was astonished because I've never seen this before, even on regular films where parts are, a 20th, good parts are a 20th of the size of this part. I never saw him on set with a script or sides, ever. I never saw him check them. He sort of learnt it. And that doesn't do him sufficient value to say he learnt it. He kind of absorbed it in a way that wasn't to do with rote learning. In the way you might imagine learning a speech. You have a speech, you learn it, you practice it, you kind of think, I got that bit wrong. The guy just knew it like he'd written it. And he didn't get any of it wrong. It wasn't and Sorkin's a stickler for his punctuation and the rhythm and stuff like that. He didn't get any of it wrong. He was never wrong. right early on, I thought it was brilliant. He said, well, no, every time I talk to her, I'm trying to teach her something, regardless of what everybody else is saying about the relationship, and and he said, and regardless of what I'm saying about the relationship, every time I speak to her, I'm trying to teach her something. And he was right, of course, when you looked at it, and he was actually, if you look at it very carefully, each time he's communicating, he doesn't want to be talking to her sometimes because he wants to be in this other world, which he's creating, this other thing, which is his child. I mean, it's very simple, really, I think, is that his dedication was so much to this idea of what he was doing that he didn't feel he could be in any other world, and this other world was this child, and he didn't feel he could be in it until he learned that he could be in both these worlds, I think, which is the kind of trajectory of the journey of the story. Because you do a film like this, it's got like, well, you're going to get lookalikes or what, and you can get lookalikes. You can go out, you can get decent actors, good actors who are lookalikes, but you need great actors, really, But there's something in them that is the essence of the character, and it's not a replica. We're not taking photographs. It's not, there's no photographs at the end of the film of what the people really look like or anything like that. This is portraits of people, But the essence of something about them is there. He says the nature of people is something to be overcome. He wants to transform people, which is worrying in one sense. Except, of course, what he's actually doing, because he's in the world of communication, it's ultimately liberated us. I think they'll sense that from, the way that this world has changed by what he's been able to do, because it's about mobilizing everybody, He says, he has this speech right at the, it comes at the end of the film, but it's chronologically, it's at the beginning of the film, is that imagine having this power, not just in good people's hands, in everyone's hands. Imagine, that was the idea, that everybody can have this, and everybody does have it now. We all got it now. We've all got instant access to all information straight away. So then it's just a question of what are you going to do with it? And that's up to us, and that's up to everyone now, what we do with this power,
This movie is not a biopic. It's what it gets called because it's about because it's nonfiction. It's about someone real, but it's not a biography. It's not there isn't a cradle to grave structure to it. We zero in. The movie only has 3 scenes, and those 3 scenes are in real time. Real time, of course, means that 35 or 40 minutes for you in the audience is the same as 35 or 40 minutes for a character on the screen. It's 3 scenes. They all take place backstage before 3 product launches. The original Macintosh in 1984. Then after Steve left Apple, his next venture, which was called Next, in 1988. And then 10 years after that, his return to Apple with basically the iMac, which is the Macintosh that we all use now, in 1998. And so it's just 3 scenes. And in those 3 scenes, all these conflicts that he has in his life get played out. The most important person I spoke to, I think, was Lisa, Steve's daughter. While Lisa was not willing to speak to Walter Isaacson because her father was alive at the time and she was concerned about alienating either her father or her mother or her stepmother or perhaps all 3, she was very generous with her time with me. And that it was after speaking to Lisa that I felt like I had a way into the movie. It really boils down to Woz believing that being a genius and being a nice guy aren't 2 things in opposition to each other. That you can be both at the same time, and that if you can't be both at the same time, choose being a nice guy. Here's a great difference between a character and a person. A character in a movie, in a play, in a television show can be unlikable and incredibly compelling at the same time. Chances are, if there's a person in life who you find unlikable, you don't want to spend time with them. What I did was again, after reading Walter's book a lot, after reading everything that you could read about this guy and these people, and particularly after talking to everybody, I identified 5 conflicts in Steve's life with other people, and found ways to play them out at these events.
In the first act of the film, Chris Ann is quite a lot more desperate, and really needing Steve to step up and help her out. And I think in the second act, what I imagine is that there have been years of these types of scenes playing out between them where, yes, they insult each other, yes, they know how to push each other's buttons, but also they kind of really know the map of the argument in a way. It's familiar territory at this point. What's interesting about the dynamic, I think, is he talks to her like she's smart, like she's a person. On the one hand, he really sort of recognizes how bright she is, but on the other hand, he's sort of callous as well, and can't really seem to, at least from Chris Ann's perspective, he can't really seem to give her what she clearly needs. What to Chris Ann is very obvious, you know, a little bit of attention, he can't really notice how uncomfortable she is in the room, or he doesn't make any effort to make it easier for her. What excited me about it is, you know, Sorkin's amazing writing style, and he just stays ahead of his audience so well, and all of his characters are really complicated and bright, and the pace is just amazing, I don't know, I think I've always been such a big fan of his writing that this really shows off some of his unique gifts to make something be really, really riveting and interesting without, you know, cars exploding or any tricks or anything. You know, it's really just people in rooms talking, and it feels as thrilling as some kind of really twisted thriller. Michael Fassbender is kind of a really annoying person because, you know, he did a movie where he had he had a big massive ball on his head, and he's still completely riveting. You know, I mean, the amount of talent he has in his pinky is just ridiculous. I mean, he brings so much to this role, and, you know, I'm just privy to this little slice of it. But he's just thrilling to work with. So electric and alive and surprising and natural, and I guess I think another actor might shy away from the more questionable, darker sides of Steve, and I think Michael is really brave to sort of embrace those elements.
My guy is called Andy Hertzfeld. And Andy was one of the original members of the Mac team. He was invited in early on at that time to specialize in certain aspects of the Mac programming. And he lingers on in our story as a friend to Steve and to Chris Ann, someone who's been in their lives, and to Joanne. He maintains a friendship with them over the course of years, and I think that's why Aaron chose to include him in this particular story, is that he provides a kind of levity and some insight into some aspects of Steve's character that we don't necessarily get to see with the other people. you know, with all the whirlwinds that are being thrust at him, he's the eye of the hurricane, so to speak, and he's handling it with such tremendous aplomb and lightness, and you know, his ability to be able to balance everything that's needed from him is wonderful to watch, and he makes it look really easy, and that's been remarkable to see as well. Danny's a surprise every day. You never know what he's going to say, where he's going to move. He seems to be a million miles ahead of me in particular, but he knows in a very deep way, I think, the kind of story he wants to tell, and is at the same time he's surprising himself, and he's learning about the story as it goes on. I think Andy understands Steve on such a deep level that in some cases, like friends can do, if they know you well enough, they can help you from perhaps making indelible mistakes in your lives. Andy anticipates that Steve, through stubbornness, might mess up his relationship with his daughter, and as a result of that, he jumps ahead and helps them out financially, knowing full well that he may get in trouble by Steve, or Steve's certainly not going to like it. Yet at the same time, knowing that they will make up with each other, that something needs to be done immediately, and he does it. And I think he's okay with dealing with the consequences of that. This is not a traditional biopic in the sense that it starts from when somebody is born and takes them to the end of their life. It really focuses on pivotal moments in Steve's life. And as such, it takes you through the story as opposed to educating you in a linear fashion. You get thrown into it emotionally, and you find yourself having a great time watching these people drive themselves nuts most of the time. And I think you experience who they were by being thrown into the action as opposed to being subject to having it explained.